Hey everyone, and welcome. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here today. In today's explainer, we're going to unlock a brand new superpower for you, the ability to read the secret language of chemistry. We're diving into the molecular ledger, tracking atoms in chemical reactions. Now, if you've ever looked at a chemical equation and felt like you were staring at a bowl of alphabet soup mixed with random math, well, you are in exactly the right place. Okay, let's jump right in and make sense of the whole shebang.
So whenever you look at a chemical reaction, what you're really looking at is matter transforming. But to track that matter, to actually understand what is reacting and what is being produced, we have to crack the code. And honestly, the biggest mystery of that code usually comes down to one crucial question. What do those numbers in a chemical formula actually mean? I promise you, they aren't just random digits thrown in there to mess with your head. They are exact counts. They're instructions. And once you know how to read them, a completely new world opens up.
Think about it like this. If you're walking down the street and you need to identify a very specific car, what do? You look at its license plate, right? Well, chemical formulas are basically the license plates of compounds. They tell you exactly what atoms are present in a molecule and exactly how many of each atom are riding around in that little chemical vehicle. If you misread the license plate, you're going to identify the wrong car. And if you misread a chemical formula, you completely misidentify the substance. There's literally no room for error. Now, there's a really beautiful underlying principle to all of this. The book of Habakkuk, chapter 2, verse 2 tells us, write the vision, make it plain. And you know, this isn't just great life advice, it actually perfectly fits the science of chemistry. Having clear symbols and numbers completely prevents confusion. They beautifully support telling the truth with data. When we write out a chemical formula correctly, we are essentially taking this invisible, microscopic world and making it plain and clear for everyone to see.
And this perfectly illustrates why getting this right is so incredibly important. If we look at clear information versus, say, misreading a formula, we see exactly why this matters in the real world. Imagine you're in a massive industrial chemical plant. Misreading a formula there could cause terrible waste, or worse, serious danger. Knowing exactly how many atoms of each element are involved is how we follow the law of conservation of mass. It basically means we can analyze reactions safely, knowing exactly what goes in and exactly what comes out.
All right, so let's start building your codebreaker toolkit. The very first tool you're going to need is the subscript. Subscripts are those tiny little numbers sitting slightly below and right after an element symbol. The absolutely crucial thing to remember here is this: a subscript applies only to the element right before it, just that one. And a quick pro tip, if there's no subscript written at all, we just assume it's an invisible number 1.
Okay, tool number 2 is the coefficient. Now, unlike that tiny little subscript, the coefficient is the big number placed right at the very front of the entire chemical formula. And because it sits right at the front, it has a massive job. It multiplies every single atom in the entire chemical formula unit that follows it. Think of the coefficient as a giant multiplier that scales up the whole molecule. So if a subscript tells you how many wheels are on one single car, the coefficient tells you how many whole cars are parked in the lot.
And finally, the last tool in your kit, parentheses. Just like in your math classes, parentheses are used to group things together. In chemistry, they group specific atoms together inside a molecule. When you see a subscript on the outside of those parentheses, it multiplies everything on the inside. It's a total package deal. Oh, and remember, if you have a big coefficient sitting at the very front of the molecule, it's going to multiply that entire group all over again. So you really got to keep your eyes peeled.
Section 1. Practice. Tracking the atoms.
All right, let's take these tools for a spin with a super simple formula. How many atoms are in CO2? Step 1, let's identify our elements. We've got C for carbon and O for oxygen. Step 2, let's look for our numbers. Carbon has no number right after it, so remembering our rule, that's an invisible 1. Oxygen, on the other hand, has a tiny 2 after it. That is our subscript. And since the subscript applies only to the guy right before it, that 2 belongs exclusively to oxygen. The final result? We've got 1 carbon atom and 2 oxygen atoms. Boom, perfect. Okay, let's level up. What happens if we toss a coefficient in there? Let's look at 4H2O. Now, we know from H2O alone that we have 2 hydrogens and 1 oxygen, right? But that big coefficient, 4, sitting at the front, that means we have 4 entire water molecules. So we take our 2 hydrogens, multiply by 4, and get 8 total hydrogen atoms. Then we take our 1 oxygen, multiply it by that same coefficient of 4, and we get 4 total oxygen atoms. You see how that coefficient just scales the whole thing up?
All right, brace yourselves. Here is the ultimate challenge. We are going to combine all three tools at once: subscripts, coefficients, and parentheses. We need to count the atoms in 2CaOH2. Now don't panic, just follow the steps. Step 1, always look inside the parentheses first. We have 1 oxygen and 1 hydrogen inside. Step 2, look right outside those parentheses at the little subscript 2. That means we multiply what's inside by 2. So now we're looking at 2 oxygens and 2 hydrogens. Step 3, we absolutely cannot forget that big coefficient 2 at the very front. That is going to multiply everything in the whole molecule by 2.
So, let's look at the final tally here. Calcium was outside the parentheses, so it started as just 1. But that big coefficient of 2 at the front multiplies it, giving us 2 calcium atoms total. Now for oxygen, it was 1 inside, multiplied by the subscript 2 to get 2, and then multiplied again by the big coefficient 2, giving us 4 total oxygens. And the exact same math happens for hydrogen, resulting in 4 total hydrogens. Look at that, you literally just decoded a highly complex chemical formula. How cool is that?
Okay, now it's your turn to take the wheel. For your homework in this explainer, I want you to count the atoms in H2SO4, 3CO2, and CaOH2. After that, explain in your own words how a coefficient changes atom counts and why accurate atom counting is so incredibly important. I know for a fact you can tackle these because you now have the exact toolkit you need to solve them. Take your time, write it out clearly, and just trust the rules we've gone over today. You've got this.
Section 2. Smart Minds, Spiritual Peace.
So, we've spent all this time sharpening your scientific minds, right? Learning how to track matter and calculate atoms with total accuracy. But as part of the Heroesmart Academy's Godly Learner series, there's a core belief that brilliant minds also need an anchor. The idea here is to intertwine biblical morality with education because, well, the thought is that education without a moral compass can actually end up doing harm. The book of Romans, chapter 8, verses 6 and 7, talks about finding peace of mind by keeping the mind spiritual. And that's the goal of learning this way. It's about being scientifically literate, absolutely, but also having that peace of mind that comes from being guided by a strong moral compass.
So I want to leave you with this final, somewhat provocative thought. What is the point of being smart and highly educated if we just continue to make choices that hurt ourselves or other people? As you go off to balance those chemical equations, remember to balance your brilliant mind with a strong heart too. Knowledge is power for sure, but it's morality that guides that power toward doing good. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today to decode the molecular ledger. Good luck with your homework and keep that curiosity alive.